Hello everyone, Ryan here. So during the month of April, I listened to an audiobook titled Flat Broke with Two Goats by Jennifer McGaha. And it was actually part of some kind of like book club thing that my local library, and I believe a lot of other libraries were sponsoring or hosting rather. Yeah, hosting. And I didn't know anything about it beforehand, before listening to the audiobook. It just seemed slightly interesting. It's a memoir about the author's, about her experience when she finds out that her and her husband, they owe a lot of back taxes because, for whatever reason, her husband, David, never bothered to file their taxes. And which that is kind of weird in itself. But what makes it even weirder is the fact that her husband, he was also, I don't know if he still is, but at the time he was an accountant. And it was his job to file taxes for a lot of other people, other small businesses and whatnot. But he just never bothered to file his own taxes. I guess technically joint taxes between him and his wife, Jennifer McGaha. And so, yeah, that's when I got to that part in the audiobook, it's boggled my mind kind of. Because I don't know, for the most part, it didn't seem like if he had any kind of nefarious reasons for not filing his taxes. But I don't know, maybe the author, maybe she chose to leave out all of that. Because pretty much she doesn't really go into any other details about that. Because then the rest of it is about how, so because they owed all these back taxes, their home was foreclosed on, and they were forced to move into the country where I guess they had already lived close to some wooded area, but after their home was foreclosed on, then they really had to move right into the country, where they were pretty much surrounded by woods and wild animals, and they're forced to live in, and the way she described it, I guess they moved into some kind of, I want to say like old cabin of some kind. Yeah, to me that's how she described it, but some kind of cabin that had been, I want to say like remodeled or refurbished like more than a couple times, but it was still pretty old and dusty and rundown, and yeah, and it was like, to her it was a surprise that they even had running water, and so then eventually they learn to live off the land, and they get some chickens, raise chickens, they get goats, raise goats, and then you just pretty much learn how to deal with their situation. And I liked how this is written. I would say, to me it seems like it was definitely well written. I like how the author, I like how she would describe certain things, and I liked hearing about the part where when they started raising goats, and it was interesting because to think about it, like myself, I never even bothered to think about how it is that goats behave. But according to the author, when she would describe each goat's behavior, seemed pretty much like, I guess they kind of act like dogs, but also like also kind of like children in a way. And yeah, because when she would talk about like the chickens, like the way the chickens behaved, pretty much for me, they seemed like, they behaved how you would expect chickens to behave. And then of course, I think like it didn't help that her and her husband, they ended up becoming attached to the chickens and the goats, and because it made it harder for them to deal with, the different injuries that the chickens or goats would sustain, or if they, like there's one part where a goat gives birth and the goat's in pain. And Jennifer McGaha, the author, she even mentions the fact that, because I guess she had ancestors that also owned a farm at one point or something like that. And she mentioned that, she was pretty certain that back when her ancestors were alive, on their farm, if they had a sick goat to deal with, she said, that she was pretty sure they had no trouble with just putting the goat out of its misery. But for her, it was harder for her to even think about that, because she became attached to the goats and the chickens, and which that kind of got me thinking too, because like for me, like I figure I've always kind of like been interested in that. Like I've been wanting to, for a long while now, I've been wanting to start like growing my own food, and then also looking into things like raising chickens, or I don't know about goats though. Because when I was growing up, one of my uncles, at one point he had like a ranch, and so he owned a lot of land, and then he had some chickens that he raised chickens for a while, but then he eventually stopped because it got too expensive, and like all the chickens got sick at one point or something, and he couldn't afford to deal with them anymore. But because I remember like when I was little, I think when I was like 4 or 5, or even 6 years old, I remember like when I'd go to my uncle's ranch and feed the chickens. I don't know, that's always been one of, like, stood out as it was like the first time for me that I was surrounded by a bunch of chickens, live chickens. So yeah, in that regard, I understand the authors, her and her husband's, I guess, I don't know if it's fair to say fascination, or just, well, first off, it's kind of like they were forced to make the best of their situation, which they did. But then they became attached to these animals that were meant to keep them alive. And I don't know, I guess that's both a good thing and a bad thing. So, overall, I would give this 4 out of 5 stars. Yeah, 4 out of 5. I came across a lot of like bad reviews of this. I guess because a lot of people kind of pretty much like me, like they were stumped as to why they're like, well, wait, a lot of reviews that I read were along the same lines of something similar to the fact that they didn't understand why it was that her husband didn't pay any taxes for so long, and but there are a lot of harsh reviews too, because they would say this woman was just completely oblivious, way, what the hell's wrong with her? Like, that's actually the kind of reviews I came across for this. But yeah, for me, I saw it more as like, it seemed like the author chose to omit certain details. So, I don't know. I still, I kind of feel like that, yeah, there had to have been a little more to it than just her husband didn't pay taxes. I don't know. I'm not saying that I don't believe that is the case. It could very well be. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, but it could have also been that maybe, you know, something else happened. And so, I mean, you know, I'm not going to speculate. That's not my job to speculate. But yeah, I mean, overall, you know what, I'd say is maybe not one of the best memoirs I've come across, but it was okay. It was interesting. Like I said, I mean, I guess my favorite part of it was just listening to the author describe the part when they would raise when they're raising chickens and goats, and that's pretty much my favorite portion of the audiobook. So yeah, again, I give it 4 out of 5, and that'll do it for my review of Flat Broke with Two Goats by Jennifer McGaha. I don't know, I like that last name, McGaha. So yeah, thanks for watching, thanks for listening. As always, till next time, don't forget, keep it real, keep on rocking, and peace.